Hello. Uh, my name is Matt Nelson. I am the director of the Writing and Critical Expression Hub at UCSD, one of the many acronyms in our city for higher education. I wanted to just pause on this name for a second, Writing and Critical Expression Hub. So the job that I applied for, so I started in August, so everything is brand new and I feel very frantic. So if I looked panicked, that's why. But the job that I applied for was the director of the Writing and Communications Hub. And then when I got to campus, they were like, you could change the name. And I was like, what? I can change the name? But you need to do it in like 2 days. So then I started like thinking like, oh, what am I going to rename this thing? And then like UCSD is huge and everybody's named everything. All the names are taken basically, right? So then I was trying to create space though to be able to participate in stuff like this and to create space for students to be able to think about writing in a kind of more expansive way, right? Writing in a kind of everything that could possibly mean. So I was thinking a lot about design, visual rhetoric, design rhetoric, but all kinds of ways. So I wanted to pick a term that was sort of inherently contradictory and had a kind of rhetorical effect of making people go, what? Right? And people either like go, oh, this is terrible, or oh, I love this. And there's kind of the implied contradiction in there of sort of like critical what? Critical analysis or creative expression. So they rub up against each other. So the idea was to sort of create some space so I could be part of things like this, which leads me to my next point, which is that I'm a total fraud. Like, I have no business standing up here talking right now. There's really, hi, great, right? Yeah, perfect, yeah. Because I don't know anything really about the digital humanities except what I've read since I met Aaron, really, right? Except that I'm attracted to the idea of it because it suggests to me, oh, there's more space for us to open up more ways to think about old things and combine them with new things, right? More rhetorical space for students to think about things and students to do research. So I'm happy to be here, but I also wanted to start with a confession. Maybe I should be back there in the Center for Catholic Thought and Culture. So we all know the moment in a moment, like in a lecture, in a speech, in a class, that moment when somebody actually, somebody's voice shifts, you know that shift, and you know it's about to come, like something actually personal, right? That moment. Does anybody ever think about how weird it is that you know before they say it, that it's about to shift? Like, it's so weird to me, right? Or it's like listening to people read fiction on like the New Yorker podcast. You can come in halfway through and go like, oh, this is fiction, right? You need to hear 3 words and they're using their author voice, right? Or the poetry voice, right? It kind of drives me crazy. But it's really, really interesting that your attention sharpens in those situations of a lecture or a speech, right? And it's like something else is going on in those moments, and you sort of have this breath, and you suddenly have new perspective on things. I think about that a lot because I think about this idea of like something's being exposed, like what's happening in that moment. Like you feel like something's being revealed. A lot of you I'm sure teach, right? And you know, oh, I'm losing them, right? I'm gonna tell the story of when I fell down the stairs, right? Or whatever it is, right? And all of a sudden everybody's paying attention. You're like, oh, why don't you do this when I'm talking about whatever? So I think about that a lot, like the idea that the risk is important for people paying attention to you, right? Or for being able to hear you. That capacity for error or failure, again, exposure, honesty, specificity, personality. So I've taught for a long time, and I've taught both like critical writing stuff, literature analysis. I've sort of turned off all those parts of my brain in some ways after I started teaching creative writing, because I started in a PhD program doing like critical theory stuff, and then there was a moment where I was like, wait, why are we talking like this? What is happening in this room? And so I left and I was doing some writing and I applied and then went back and got an MFA. But it made me, all the teaching that I've done has made me realize something. The time that I've been most effective as a teacher is when I stopped really marking their papers at all and just started telling them when they're being honest and when they're lying. And I've never seen students get better as writers faster than when I just started telling them, this is bullshit, this part here. That thing right there, I can tell that that's real, right? And they go, oh, right? And they know what they're talking about, the same way you know when somebody's voice is about to, when that shift happens, they're about to reveal something. People know it on the page as well, right? So I think, though, about why don't we encourage our students to take more risks? Why don't we create the space for that risk? And it's part of the reason, again, something like this excites me, because I think there's all kinds of spaces for students to take risks, right? Because in a lot of ways, I think you guys are all taking risks, right? There's sort of, there's like an edge that's happening with this stuff, right? There's a lot of newness around. So there's a risk there. And I think inviting students to participate in that risk is really exciting. And it makes me think about this thing that, I don't know if you hear this from your students. Do you hear this? Why can't I write in my own voice? Does anybody else get really irritated when they hear this? Anyone? Right? Like, what makes you think you have a voice? Who gave you the right, right? But it's a really interesting question. Why can't you write in your own voice? Like sometimes I sit there and think, well, you don't have a voice yet, and I think that's a legitimate answer, right? Well, we've got to put you in a box so you can learn how to think logically and present yourself to certain audiences, blah, blah, blah. But it makes me wonder, again, about that question of risk. Could we give students more opportunities to take risks? So, I would invite you guys to think about, does this area of scholarship make it possible for students to take more risks? The other thing I think a lot about is authenticity. So an authentic writing task. Can I just pause for a second and say, I just realized that I got the suckers deal of being the last person to speak that whole day of conference. I was like, wait a second. How did this come to me? I feel like I got set up. All right. Anyway, back to this. What's the difference between authentic and inauthentic writing? The stakes, right? That there are actual stakes. Students write bullshit for us because they know that it's bullshit, right? At a certain level, right? They know that they've been in classrooms their whole lives. They know how to play that game, right? And we have a lot of successful students who know how to take that opportunity to do more with it, right? To take that as like, okay, I'm gonna play the game and I'm gonna look for a way to make this real for myself, right? But the others, we struggle to persuade them to make that move, right? And so sometimes I think about, is there a way to create conditions for them to participate in authentic writing experiences, something where there are actual stakes? And that makes me also think about the question of audience, like who is the audience? So I think part of the problem with student writing in the classroom is we give them the audience, right? They know who the audience is. Authentic writing tasks like, say, grant writing, like you have to go locate the audience in a lot of ways. So the past 3 years at my previous institution, myself and my writing partner, a faculty member in the biology department, we decided to take on the task of writing these big Department of Education, like Title V grant applications. They're huge. They're like 80 pages. It's an immense amount of work. Any rational university pays somebody to do just this. And then, there's like the two of us who are like, yeah, sure. All right, I'll give up my life for like 4 months. That sounds great. And so year one, work real hard, staying up all night, multiple nights, lots of hard work, write the thing, feel real good about it, submit it, get readers' feedback. It is like nothing I've ever seen before. 3 readers, like I was just like, I don't know if these people know how to read. Like where they'd be like, one reader would say like, you're not addressing an educational problem. And another one would say, oh, addresses an educational problem, definitely, for sure. And we ended up sort of tying, and so we lost in a tiebreaker. Okay, well, we learned something. I think, right? We couldn't make heads or tails of the readers' comments. Year 2, we go back, we do it again, more or less the same thing. Year 3, this past year, we realized somebody's got to tell us who we're writing for. And somebody explained, like, you're writing for people in the Department of Education. They're not going to have PhDs, right? You're writing for a different kind of reader. And then we realized, like, oh, we're academics, right? We're dummies. We've been writing as though everybody on the other side of this has a PhD, right? We were searching for the wrong, we had thought we had located the audience, but we had located the wrong audience. So we shifted rhetorical gears. This year, 100 out of 100, no weaknesses, all 3 readers. Like, oh, why didn't somebody just tell us this 3 years ago? We would have dumbed it down 3 years ago, right? I mean, honestly, that's what it felt like. I think it is a better grant proposal this 3rd time around, but like now we get $6 million. The first 2 times around, we don't get $6 million, right? That's the difference. But that was a situation I think about of like locating the audience. Can we give students the actual opportunity to locate an audience? But I think the 3rd one is actually much more interesting for constructing an audience. And this is where I think about it as a fiction writer, right? Because as a fiction writer, you're constructing a narrative identity, a narrator identity, and through that construction, you're also constructing an implied author identity that is not you, but that people can read behind that, right? And when you're doing all that, you're also trying to construct a certain audience, right, that can respond to you. I should tell you something personal right now. I can tell I'm losing people, right? But I just wanted to invite the idea into the room of, for what you're working on and working with students on, is there a chance to give them the opportunity to construct an audience, or to invite them to think about themselves as constructing an audience with the choices they're making with their rhetoric and whatever projects they're working on. So I'm thinking a lot about this in terms of production, right? It's really interesting to me, the idea of scholarship, like what was being described by the previous speakers. I think a lot about production of text and getting students to produce text. And so I'm coming at this, I wish the Wikipedia thing had been here, because I wanted to sort of work off that as well, because it's interesting asking students to use Wikipedia as a form of composition, right? Because it's authentic. They don't know who the audience is, but it's also anonymous, which I think is really interesting, right? It sort of goes against what I was suggesting with that idea of risk, giving students the opportunity to take risks. Oh boy, I'm not doing that right now. That'll take forever. But I was thinking also about anonymity and personality, right? Like, who can take the risks? Like, it's easy for me to say, right, given my identity and how I sit in society, to say, oh, let's take risks, right? It's easy for me as a professional to get up and start with confessing, oh, I'm a fraud, right? Like, that's easy for me to do. For other people, they're not going to have that opportunity. They don't have that luxury, right? So all I'm trying to sort of get around is ideas of inviting you to think about risk, to think about authenticity, to think about those opportunities for your students, and how this sort of the edge of what you're working on can give students the chance to explore that. So I think involving students in research is one example of that, but there might be others. And that's really all I've got.